The Archdiocese of Detroit, Michigan. The story of the faith in this region began with the labors of missionary priests, was sustained and nurtured by early immigrants to the region, and carries on today under the leadership of its current Archbishop, Alan Henry Vigneron.
Most every attempt at evangelization talks about encounter, grow, witness. The witness part is what helps incentivize people. If there are those they respect who stand up and say, life is better because I've embraced the cross, that will incentivize people to take that step themselves.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. Detroit, the Motor City, is one of the greatest cities in America. Long a leader in industry, music, and architecture, it is also the sea city of the Archdiocese of Detroit.
The city of Detroit, when I was in grade school, was the 5th largest city in the United States. Today, it's a very different world, and I think we have come, by and large, to be at peace that it's different. God will help us with that, and I think that's what we're about. I think we've gotten to a point where we're not preoccupied with mourning the past, but involved in trying to build a future. Now, that's in the civic culture, I think. In the life of the church, it's very much similar, but particularly through the lens of the new evangelization.
Detroit traces its roots to the early 1600s, when French explorers attempted to open up trade routes around the Great Lakes. In 1701, French explorer Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac arrived and founded Fort Detroit. The first building which Cadillac and his fellow Frenchmen built was a church. Construction began on the Feast of St. Anne, and this first Catholic church was eventually dedicated in her name. And St. Anne has since become the patroness of the city. St. Anne's Church is therefore the oldest continually operating parish in Detroit and the second oldest in the United States.
Perhaps more than any diocese in the country, the Archdiocese of Detroit reflects the trajectory of the history of the Catholic Church in the United States. It started out as a frontier outpost served by missionary priests who tended to a scattered Catholic flock. It grew over the course of the 19th century, bolstered by waves of immigrants who were committed to building up parishes, schools, and other institutions that would allow them to practice their faith in their native tongue and to preserve their ethnic heritage. By the 20th century, the Catholic population began to enjoy upward social and economic mobility.
From 1801 to 1821, Detroit had one priest, a man by the name of Father Gabriel Richard. Father Richard was a formidable persona in Michigan. He was an extraordinary civic leader, he was an educator, he was a pastor. The obligations that were placed on this priest were enormous. He was co-founder of what becomes the University of Michigan, and he becomes a delegate of the Michigan Territory to the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington. He's been referred to as someone who was multi-talented, multifaceted, a man of God who brought all of his abilities to bear on the spiritual, intellectual, political, and economic development of Detroit.
The Diocese of Detroit was founded in 1833. Prior, it had fallen under the jurisdiction of the Diocese of Quebec, until it was transferred to the Diocese of Baltimore after the American Revolution. At the time of its founding, the Diocese of Detroit covered all of Michigan and the upper Midwest, including Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. In the early 20th century, Detroit became a Catholic powerhouse, and its bishops held national stature. Edward Mooney, the son of a steelworker, was the first to serve as Archbishop of Detroit. He worked to restore financial stability to the diocese following the Great Depression, and he also undertook renovations to the cathedral.
He was very approachable and had a great sense of humor. He was once quoted in Time magazine about his enjoyment of golf, saying that if your score is over 100, you're neglecting golf. If it falls below 90, you're neglecting your parish. He became more and more well-respected, and he even delivered the benediction at President Eisenhower's second inauguration. The Archdiocese of Detroit is the resting place of a humble, saintly man born Bernard Francis Casey. Many miracles have been attributed to his intercession, both before and after his death.
After being ordained into the Capuchins, he takes the name Father Solanus, and Father Solanus goes to parishes in New York to help serve and do missionary work before he returns back to Detroit. Really, he works in Detroit in a very simple and humble capacity. Wherever he served, it was said that people would line up around the block just for a moment. Father Solanus wasn't just feeding their bodies, he was feeding their spirits and he was feeding their souls as well. He had what was seen as a very healing touch.
The cause for canonization of Father Solanus Casey began less than 2 decades after his death. In 1995, he was officially named Venerable, and after the confirmation of a miracle attributed to Father Casey's intercession, he became Blessed Solanus Casey in 2017.
One of the things he was known to have said often is, it's important that we thank God ahead of time. Don't just wait and thank God after the fact, but thank God before anything happens. He said that gratitude is the sign of a rational mind.
In the latter half of the 20th century, Detroit suffered greatly from a sharp decline in industry. However, recent moves to renew Detroit's urban center have been successful, and Detroit has become known for its many efforts at urban renewal.
The Archdiocese of Detroit was one of the first in the nation to make the difficult choice to close a large number of inner-city parishes. When Cardinal Sciocca, in 1989, closed some 30 inner-city parishes and warned others that they were also in danger of closing if they did not improve their finances. Even though the decision was the result of a 5-year study, the news of the closures shocked the local Catholic community, as well as the city of Detroit itself. Many of the parishes that had been affected were the bedrock of their local neighborhoods and a source of stability in a changing city. In more recent decades, the diocese has been shaped by the reforms of the Second Vatican Council, as well as reaction to them. And in many ways, the history of the diocese is a microcosm for the history of the Catholic Church in the United States, with all of its triumphs, tensions, and transformations.
What I love about what we are about as Detroiters, what we are about as Catholics, what we are about as just disciples of Christ is that we never are impeded. Nothing will stop us. We rise from the ashes, and we keep getting walloped by pandemics and challenges and different things that occur. But regardless, we pivot and we adapt. And even though we don't have as many people drawn here presently, we are now doing a live stream. People are being able to see the cathedral in ways that they have never experienced it in the past.
Well, we've gone through a great dislocation. When people want to talk about Detroit in its heyday, I think the best analog is Silicon Valley with, so much money, such prosperity. We are not this church that was built up of institutions made for a huge influx of immigrants. That's past. And we need to be about this new way of living our life as the church. And God will provide for us the wisdom and the resources we need to be the Catholic Church of the 21st century in Southeast Michigan. This is the mission He's given us, and we must have enough stuff and graces and realities, or He'd send us more, so we'll move ahead.
So we are the 5th cathedral in the Archdiocese. Prior, there were 4 cathedrals in the diocese before we were made an Archdiocese in 1937. First one is the 2nd oldest parish in the country, St. Anne's, which is under the bridge that goes over to Canada. Then the 2nd cathedral they chose was St. Peter and Paul, which is literally the oldest physical church that we have in Southeast Michigan. It's a big Italianate, beautiful, grand building that is run by the Jesuits. Then we had something called a proto-cathedral. One that was chosen as the proto-cathedral was attached to our former chancery, which is really an interesting building. It's 3-tiered, could fit about 2,000 people. And then they chose St. Patrick's, which is also in a downtown area. The challenge was it was in a rougher situation, the community was very small, and it had a lot of deferred maintenance. So when we became an archdiocese, Cardinal Mooney wanted us to have something grander. Thus, he chose the existing parish of Blessed Sacrament, and then we became the Cathedral of the Most Blessed Sacrament. With cathedrals, they've always been the center of a city, center of commerce, center of politics, and obviously of faith. And what the Archbishop has asked me to do is to try to make this a real apostolic center to draw people here.
The parish of the Most Blessed Sacrament was founded in 1905, and the current church structure was built in 1915. However, the interior was not completed for another 15 years, and the facade would not be completed until 1951, over a decade after it had been named a cathedral. The cathedral was built in a Norman Gothic style, designed by Cleveland architect Henry Walsh.
So what happens with the Norman Gothic cathedral, what a cathedral should be about, it draws people in, but with architecture, it needs to affect you emotionally. So with Gothic architecture, it is supposed to be intimidating. As you see the grandness and the glory of God. Hence, the title of our windows can often be the glory of God, the glory of angels. Everything is linked together in a Gothic cathedral.
It's really easy to see why this building was selected to be the new cathedral of the Diocese of Detroit. It is really grand, but it's also staid and somewhat masculine. It has stunning windows that have a great amount of detail and tracery around the stained glass. The interior is really defined by its stonework. The ribs to the ceiling are really elegant. The walls are variegated in color because of the stonework, and so it really is quite dynamic. The stained glass features jeweled depictions of the life of Christ. The interior and exterior both have this sort of stoic, masculine feeling. This is a fortress, a palace.
The altar is in the very center, and then it's underneath the flesh or the spire, and it illuminates out and goes forth. Even when all lights are out in the cathedral, that the altar is always lit. And then we have the cathedral to show that this is a significant spot.
In September of 1987, the Cathedral of the Most Blessed Sacrament welcomed the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, during his apostolic visit to the United States. Several items created for the occasion, including the chair used by the Pope during Mass, are still on display at the cathedral.
The chair in the Cathedral of the Most Blessed Sacrament symbolizes Archbishop Vigneron's authority as the Apostle of Detroit. Alan Vigneron was born in 1948 just north of Detroit. Feeling a call to the priesthood as a young man, he entered Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, where he graduated in 1970.
I actually come from one of the more rural parishes of the diocese. I'm the oldest of 6. I have 4 brothers and a sister. Yeah, I thought about becoming a priest early in grade school. I had the privilege early on of being invited by the sister who ran the altar boys to become an altar boy. I was always fascinated with the Eucharist. So as I matured, my motivation, my interest matured. I think it's almost always the case. At some point, most every priest comes this close to giving up. And for me, it was when I was a sophomore, 20 years old, 67, 68, the chaos of the United States, the confusion in the life of the church. A lot of my friends were leaving the seminary, and I was very close to leaving myself. I received an insight in my prayer that I was being cowardly. If I really did love our Lord, I should stand with him in the tough time. You know, he has that line, "You are they who have stood by me in the time of trial." I don't know if that was in my head when I had this epiphany. I don't know that that was the definitive moment when I decided I would continue on to the priesthood, but I think it was the moment that led to the deciding moment. It's also my experience as a priest that almost every couple that gets married comes this close to a definitive breakup. And what makes the difference is if they reconcile. And that maybe isn't the engagement, but it's the definitive moment that leads to the engagement. As I look back on my life when I was 20, that was the definitive moment that led me to be able to make my commitment when I was 25 years old.
Vigneron continued his theological studies in Rome at the Pontifical Gregorian University before being ordained for the Archdiocese in 1975. In 1987, he completed a PhD in philosophy at the Catholic University of America and subsequently began teaching at his alma mater, Detroit's Sacred Heart Seminary.
I love teaching. Certainly, for me, that joy was increased by teaching men who aspired to the priesthood. On that side of it, I think being a seminary teacher is a way to take a deeper possession of your priesthood, because you have to think about it in so many new ways if you're going to be effective in handing on priestly identity, priestly virtues to the next generation.
In 1996, Vigneron was named Auxiliary Bishop of Detroit, a position which he held for 7 years. In 2003, he became the 3rd Bishop of Oakland, California, where Vigneron served as shepherd for 6 years.
I was very startled, honestly. I thought we knew that we were going to get auxiliary bishops. I thought I knew who that was going to be, and I didn't think it was me. But when I think about the day, we were engaged in a very important statewide referendum to stave off euthanasia. The Archbishop, Cardinal Maida, particularly made a point that he wanted to dedicate me to this work of being pro-life. I remember that very clearly.
In 2009, Vigneron returned home as Pope Benedict XVI appointed him the 5th Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Detroit.
You know, I think that one of the cautions about a home lad being the bishop is that he'll not be accepted in Nazareth, but I haven't had that. The priests have appreciated me, and I think they respect me, even though they know who my mother and my father were, and they were in school with me. My mother, again, with her very plain spoken, said, I knew Our Lady was going to do this. I asked her to. I don't know if Our Lady told the nuncio about it, but that's what my mother interpreted things. And I will say that for the most part, I find my priests very, very cooperative. They tremendously impress me with their generosity. And it really is a tremendous example to me of my need to be docile to the Holy Spirit.
Appointed by the Pope, each bishop is ordained to exercise leadership and oversight over the Church's threefold mission of sanctifying, teaching, and governing the people of God. Archbishop Vigneron has lived out his mission with great faithfulness and passion.
If we're going to be this church on mission, basic cell of the life of the church is the family. And so we're devoting a lot of resources, my co-workers and I, in the chancery and the curia, to helping families do that. People want to be happy in their families. Most every attempt at evangelization talks about something we call encounter, grow, witness. Meet Jesus, love Jesus, share Jesus. I think the witness part is what helps incentivize people, because if there are those they respect who stand up and say, life is better because I've embraced the cross, I've embraced dying to self, I've embraced giving myself over to Christ, that will incentivize people to take that step themselves.